Is it okay to start? So, good evening everyone. Thank you for joining. This is 43rd session of Feminist Friday. So before we begin today's reading, which is on Bourdieu's work on masculine dominance and his other readings, so I'd like to just talk about the structure of today's talk and the purpose of creating this space. Feminist Friday, it's a group which is run by scholars from Center for Women Studies. And the idea is to make sure that feminist concepts are accessible to people from multiple disciplines, and we can come and learn from each other's whatever discipline we come from, and also not to limit ourselves in particular language, to create an open space, a safe space where we can apply these concepts in our life also. So just a disclaimer, we will be recording these sessions for people who are not able to join online, offline here. So at any point of time you feel that you need to stop the discussion, so we can stop the recording also. This be brief sort of an intro. We walk towards today's session will be we're looking for a little shorter session today because the commitment, but yeah, but we would like to, so the structure is some sort of a reading sections of this literature work we'll read. At the same time, then we try to discuss among ourselves. At no point we claim that we have authority on his text or we know more than all of us present here. So yeah. To begin with his text, so let's try to place Bourdieu's work from the context where he's coming from. So just a brief intro to him. He was a highly influential French sociologist, anthropologist, and a philosopher. And his theoretical contribution is in the field of sociology, cultural anthropology, social work. So people who are working with the concept of power will find his work very relevant. His work is also influenced by Karl Marx, and we keep hearing of certain concepts like symbolic violence, social capital, language and discourse. So in this conversation we will be talking about some of his concepts and the thinkers which have influenced him. So like I said, the concept of power, social inequality, cultural reproduction within the society remains important. So he's a French philosopher, and his discipline is largely like he has influenced a lot of like interdisciplinary approach to social research. He's conducted extensive fieldwork and ethnographic studies. So throughout his career, and especially in the work on culture, on class, and on education. Now, some of the key, because before we understand somebody's work, let's try to place the important philosophical influence which are impacting, shaping his worldview. And one of them is Karl Marx, because he draws from Marxist theory in the analysis of social class and reproduction of inequality. So, you're comfortable with Hindi? Okay. So just try to keep the conversation in a mixed language. So his work on the Karl Marx work on class conflicts he's inspired by his work, and that's why he brings up the role of cultural capital and symbolic power in maintaining social hierarchies. So how social hierarchies are maintained not just by class but through cultural capital and symbolic power. We'll come to his concepts of symbolic power later. Weber's concept of social stratification, he's influenced by Weber, and the relationship between power and authority also influenced, and he developed this Weber's idea further into symbolic power. Now, his ability to refers to power as something to ability to shape and influence society through cultural symbols and practices. So these words keep coming up: cultural capital, symbolic power, cultural practices. Again, third key influencer is Durkheim's work, where structural functionalism from Durkheim became his shaping of his understanding into his work, which is like the way he looks at social institutions and which he shapes individuals' behavior and collective consciousness. So his work becomes important if somebody is looking into education, that how institutions shapes individual socialization And then we'll come to, so his work is vast, like in culture, in terms of sociology, culture, education, all these institutional studies is important. Now, before we get into the text, like how do we how are we introduced to this person? Like what I can start with my acknowledgement that my field is masculinity and adolescent study, but I have no idea about his work as late as 15 days back. So in one of the sessions we were having discussion, and then somebody talked about masculine dominance, and that's how I thought, okay, the word masculinity is somewhere there. I have been reading about Foucault and power and Foucault's work on education, but not directly I was introduced. So I'm very new to his literature to acknowledge that. But it's interesting to like hear from all of you, like how were you, why were you thought that this is important for you to come in? Yeah.
Mine was really told by my fellow person who came earlier, like
Okay.
you are interested in some sociological or you should attend this session of Pierre Bourdieu.
Okay. So you came mostly for sociological concepts, like what is his work in sociology? Yeah, great. Because his concepts are like very vast, so multiple applications. Yeah, great. Do you want to share something? Later, okay. Yeah,
I think my introduction to him was also second-hand because I read Bourdieu, right?
Okay.
And I've not read his work until I read this, but he worked under him as his research assistant. So I'm maybe looking forward to how his work relates to aesthetics of Bourdieu's work, which I'm primarily interested in, is aesthetics and.
Great. So we all can acknowledge that we all know very less about this person. So let's explore, let's read and see what's there. So at this stage, I will just throw certain academic concepts. Not just that we know these words, but it's good to to have a vocabulary of these words and then unpack them, see how they make relevance to us in the process. So some of this, so this particular piece on masculine domination, which is a book by Bourdieu. Now he talks of these keywords. I'll just use symbolic violence, habitus and socialization, gendered practice. So these are the keywords that come in the text. Symbolic capital, intersectionality, of course. Then homo academicus, academic field, social reproduction, symbolic capital. Again, I'm repeating, and yeah. So now, before we read, let's just unpack this word symbolic violence. What it could mean, like how this one word help us before reading. Imagine the world where this word could be used. Symbolic violence. We know what violence is. We have seen in movies, we have probably seen in society, we read in newspaper, but what could the symbolic violence mean? Or then we see how close we are his way of thinking. What it could mean? Symbolic is something, yeah.
Portray to meaning of something. Violence used to also give a meaning to mass or some individual.
Okay, so you're saying it gives meaning. It has some, like symbol have meaning, right? Yeah. So it gives meaning to something else. Right.
Imposing certain ideas on some people.
Okay. So you think it's something which is forced, like pushed through, which could be symbolic. Okay.
That they won't recognize that they are subjugated.
Right. So important is, so you both are presenting two different meaning of symbolic violence. Not necessarily to say which is right or wrong, but these are two ways of seeing the word symbolic. So one, it's meaning, it represents some meaning, and you're saying it's forced on somebody who don't realize it. Example could be?
Example could be like in terms of caste system. Some people don't know why they are practicing certain practices. They won't ever, they just practice that they are ascribed to it.
Right. So it's in a way that we are practicing something which could be oppressive without even realizing that what we are practicing is oppressive. One thing comes repeatedly to me is like practice something like Karwa Chauth. So certain rituals which we practice without even realizing, or let's say Kanyadan. Like marriage is very common, so in Hindu rituals, this is what is done. So without realizing that how it is connected to probably the sexuality and the very essence that the girl needs to be virgin, needs to be gifted by her father, how it fits into the whole patriarchal family structure. But yeah, so I'll pause here to just read out what this masculine symbolic violence actually he's trying to argue. So he argues that masculine domination operates through symbolic violence. So the link between masculine domination and symbolic violence is that it operates, the dominance is done through violence, which refers to the subtle, like you said, it's very subtle and often unconscious. So एक तो दिखाई भी नहीं देगी, and you'll be doing it unconsciously, in which power relationships are reproduced and maintained. तो इन practices के through पावर रिलेशनशिप जो है मेंटेन किए जाएंगे. एक पावर की बहुत सिंपल सी समझ है कि पुलिस के पास पावर है, स्टेट के पास पावर है, आर्मी के पास पावर है, जिसके पास पैसा है उसके पास पावर है. But those are very visible, those are not subtle forms of power. Now we will see that how subtle forms of power are practices to maintain masculine domination. So symbolic violence is perpetrated through several social mechanisms, including language, cultural norms, everyday practices. Language, cultural norms, and everyday practices, which reinforces masculine norms and devalue feminine qualities. So it flows that symbolic violence is interconnected with language, it's interconnected with norms and everyday practices. So the example which I gave earlier, or she gave about caste, or I said about Kanyadan, these are not everyday practices, but these are norms, cultural norms probably. So what could, if you can just collectively think about what could be other practices in everyday practices, and then of course language, that how language adds to symbolic violence. I'm just opening up for everyone to think on these two concepts.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the use of slurs.
Right.
Right? Especially in the context of caste
Yeah.
in India.
Yeah.
It's not direct physical material violence.
Right. It's symbolic.
Symbolic.
Yeah. Very difficult to.
And I think again in a lot of people, at least from my generation, don't even realize the meaning, the connotations, of certain words being used and the historical context, which they but because it's so widely used, they just use it without even knowing. Yeah.
Sensitive towards the use of the word. Can you give example?
Like a very common word that I see all the time on Instagram in the comment section is chapri, the word. And it clearly has caste connotations, right? But it's not widely talked about, and contemporarily it has, largely it is associated with a certain kind of aesthetic, low aesthetic, right? Which people find socially acceptable to look down upon and everything, but the casteist connotation just gets, I think, invisibilized.
Invisibilized, yeah, that's a good example to think of. Daily language may be practiced. Even all our abuses are in a way laden with sexist, misogynist, against women, all abuses. जितनी भी गाली हम लोग देते हैं, it's symbolic violence with the use of everyday practices and language. So that is one thing. You have mentioned about caste. I tried to brought in gender aspect or sexist element. Any other identity across which we can think of symbolic
What kind
violence?
of relationship between men and women?
Yeah.
Husband and wife.
Yeah.
Women won't revolts against men, that she considered him as in order to consider herself as an ideal woman, she has to subservient to him.
Right. And how does this everyday practice of women takes place? Like, can you give an example? Every day she has to do something every day to be that good wife. And how is it violent then? Because she is doing it voluntarily. This could be a question, right? Like my mother is practicing everyday ritual. She's going to prayer, she's cooking food, she's doing everything which is expected from her. So is it really violence?
It's not violence. I think here symbolic violence doesn't mean that it involves violence. It is unconscious. It happens ideologically.
Okay.
Like in autism terms, it talks about ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus. Repressive state apparatus means like institutions, schools, institutions which involve church, media, like that, police, army. Whereas ideological state apparatus like school, which creates certain kind of ideology. No need to use physical violence and external.
Right.
Like some mental things.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think just to extend it further, we will only be able to see actual violence when we transgress those daily practices boundaries. So, it might not look like violence on somebody who is practicing mother, like she's being a good mother, taking care. Yeah, she's cooking, she's taking care. Yeah, she's taking care of everything. But the day she stopped doing it, or let's suppose she practiced her choice of not having a child itself in marriage. Does she have really that amount of choice to negotiate with a partner and say that I don't want a child? So it's only at this stage that this might translate into actual violence. So the boundary shifts from symbolic to actual violence. When I say actual violence, I'm not here to demean that symbolic violence as less value. It's equally like violent, but it's more of a like psychologically it impacts you. Yeah. Now, any other daily everyday practice we can think of as an example for symbolic violence? I mean, these are very visible ones.
It's just something that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, can be, of course, there is a naturalization of the power relationship within this concept speaks to, but does all kind of hierarchical relation or power imbalance and a naturalization of it, can the word, like this concept be applied to all such relationships? Like, for example, the first basic example, like the student-teacher relationship, right? So obviously students are expected to conform to certain norms like being on time,
Right.
doing your homework,
Right.
and of course not doing so has consequences. But
Right.
can we say that in like the repercussions, can this be applied to that? Or,
Yeah.
like, is that symbolic violence or something else?
Something else. So if I've understood her question correctly, like all power differences, wherever there is hierarchy, do we find symbolic violence present or not? Yeah.
How correct is it to
Use the word.
for that?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
power relations, as we know, is
Mm.
it's a feature in almost every relationship.
Yes.
Right?
We cannot think of an
Yeah.
equal partnership and equal power all the time. Society will remain.
And if it's everywhere, every relationship is characterized, or if you were to characterize every such relationship as symbolic violence, then it's basically the operationalization of the concept. There has to be certain exceptions.
Right.
Everything is
Yeah.
described
It
as
loses its meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where we apply and where we don't apply, that the distinction needs to be maintained.
Based
Yes.
on what?
Yes.
What are the-
This is something which we need to think more, and if you have a point, you can add. I'll just introduce again second concept, which is habitus and socialization, where Bourdieu's emphasis that the role of habitus in shaping and perpetuating masculine dominance. So he's talking about that how what is the role of habitus in masculine domination. So the habitus refers to the ingrained social and cultural dispositions that individual acquires through socialization. So through the process of socialization, one acquires habitus, which is a very close word to habits. I think it's using it in French manner.
Latin, I think.
Yeah, Latin probably. According to Bourdieu, individual internalizes masculine values, behaviors, and expectations through socialization process, which reproduces and legitimizes masculine dominance. So he's saying that, so he's making a connection between, because an individual is socialized in a particular manner, he will get certain habits, and through this, that person will acquire certain masculine values and gradually become dominant, like a male dominant figure or personality. So what are these habits we can think of, if these, just to bring it into our own context, in our own lives, like where are these habits or in us, if we reflect? Sorry for making this text very personal, because this is what we have been practicing in most of our readings, not to just look at text something out there. We read last week, we read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Yeah, and this is something, yeah, we try, he's keep asking us, inviting us to practice that. So I can think of certain values, like I, in my life, if we say that if I walk back to my home and then I have to, I know that my mother will take care of my food and my clothes, like cleaning. So it's not like I have never done that. Like I have never done that. So it gives you that amount of privilege to actually not think, and it's actually was not even allowed to enter the kitchen also. It's like you will mess it up, so you stay outside. And this became my actually habit and excuse. So every time I'll go inside and I'll not be able to do that. So if I don't know cooking and I don't know cooking, so that means it's my socialization has done that to me, and automatically it's a burden on my partner, whoever comes, whenever if I don't cook for myself. So it's this is where masculine privilege takes you through these habits. So if you can think of other habits in our own life and in our family or society.
In terms of inequalities, I did Bourdieu.
Yeah, please.
So here infant habitus is something ingrained psyche that we got through socialization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we behave in such a way that reflects our community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the way I speak, the way I eat, the way I respond to someone.
Yeah.
Like these are all the examples for habitus.
Habitus. If you can just elaborate, what could be the more examples? Like you're saying it in social stratification, in social caste also. So different caste will have different habits.
Yeah, habitus.
Yes, different habitus. Right. Moving ahead, he talks about, in the same piece, he talks, third concept is gendered practices, where Bourdieu argues gendered practices and behaviors such as sports, language, and consumption patterns contribute towards the reproduction of masculine domination. These practices often functions as norms of social distinction and reinforce gender hierarchy. So which is again what we call gender practices. Gender practices कैसे आते हैं gender practices? हमारे sports में, हमारे language में, consumption pattern में. What are the gender practices in sports? Aggressive, yes. Yes.
Body sports होते हैं, body
Right.
contact sports होते हैं.
Right.
They actually tend to be male dominated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So even if you see same sport,
Yeah.
female cricket and male cricket.
Right.
So because it is male cricket basically gets more viewership.
Absolutely.
That in turn pays more to male cricket. That's
Yeah.
just a general practice. But this also comes from
So it's a phenomenon I've seen in whenever we eat food in mess. So there's IPL going on. So like usually the boys, like they are mostly with phone and continuously in school they're checking. But that amount of craze is not, at least I have not seen in girls. So there is some sort of a gendered attachment to the sports, especially cricket, and the way you rightly said, advertisement and the whole the capitalist model and how we celebrate our success. So it's highly gendered. Language we already covered. Third is the consumption pattern. So how our consumption pattern are also gendered, which is he's talking about the consumption pattern leads to male masculine dominance. So what are these consumption patterns?
very like normal day to day. There is a line. तो लड़कियों कितना खाता है? That's really gendered.
कितना खाता है?
Like you eat this much even though you are a girl.
Acha, oh, yeah. So, yeah. So consumption is actually literally taking it to the consumption of the food. Yeah. What about consuming beauty products or like, or consuming?
I think for men, I've noticed like they have this weird attachment to their vehicles, cars and bikes.
Yes, yes, yes,
Like,
yes, yeah.
It's next level.
Next level,
They
yeah.
won't let even some like their friends drive
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
their
yeah,
baby.
yeah,
So that I don't
That
find
is-
it running.
Right, right, right.
And this obsession with a bullet, obviously in our country.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's very masculine.
Very loud, you know, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
make
yeah.
it as loud as possible. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I have to say. There's a reason behind it, yeah.
No, that's
So
fine.
the story is so.
I hope you haven't got that removed. You know, they removed the
Silencer,
silencer.
that is
and-
still, it's still there. I've not got it removed, so it's annoying to
Yeah.
listen. But the connection is, yeah, some bikes, those are more masculine, and of course, you know, scooty and cycle, and these are considered as feminine. They come with different shades of color. You know, that is.
Hatchback versus
You
SUV.
see the fashion industry, the whole fashion industry, the female, female fashion, they clothing, they particularly decided in such a way that it favors, that is not based on the need of a particular woman or general woman in general, but that is going to favor the capitalist. Like the simple example of jeans not having pocket, jeans having small pocket, so that the baggage industry can be favored. So their whole consumption is but that's more on capitalist, anti-capitalist argument. The whole dressing habits, consumption habits is done in a way so that it favors the capitalist and women just serve a tool for that.
Right. So it's basically the combination of because in gender studies we study that capitalism is not neutral, so it's also capitalist patriarchy. So it's male gaze. So if you see in cinema, it's serving to male gaze. So there's a lot of item songs, the way she is dressed, so appealing to youth, men, or some other, you know, male gaze is always there. So this capitalism comes with patriarchy combined. So it's a dual system of operation. So okay. So moving ahead, there's this next term which is symbolic capital. Symbolic capital is the Bourdieu introduces the concept of symbolic capital, which refers to the accumulation of social status and power through cultural and symbolic resources. Symbolic capital comes through association between, you know, cultural and symbolic. What could be these cultural and symbolic resources? Certain people acquire more power through cultural and symbolic resources.
Is it the same as like again the difference between this and social capital? Is it the same?
Symbolic capital and social capital.
Cultural capital.
I think it's similar. Yeah. I can't differentiate the two.
It is accumulation of power to symbolic.
It's you talk about symbolic capital. I'll just repeat it. I'm saying it's the accumulation of social status and power. Somebody acquires status and power through cultural and symbolic resources. So these are cultural and symbolic resources. Example. What could be cultural and symbolic? Like what is considered power in my culture? Okay. And then there is this cultural and symbolic resources. So one of typical North Indian, no, I would not generalize North Indian, but in Haryana and Delhi is like, if I know somebody who's in power and if I have his contact number, so that is social capital. Okay, talking about symbolic capital. So language gives me that cultural capital. If I go and speak in English fluently in a crowd, so language comes with the privilege of having access to English education system.
So consumption pattern, no?
Yeah.
Watching English movies,
Yeah.
listening to songs,
Yeah.
being able to play guitar, and
Right.
also sort of reinforces certain social groups.
Yeah.
Like even in university space, you see the groups that we inhabit are more or less. It's better here, but otherwise it's more or less homogeneous, similar cultural values.
Yeah. Different culture group people make their own groups. That's what you're saying. Yeah. You have anything to add on this symbolic capital?
Also how we dress.
Yeah.
Like if you go my village side, you
Mhm.
find different dressing pattern
Mhm.
for the males of the different strata. or even in function, you can you like someone wearing just upper caste person, you see upper how you have dressed, or a lower caste person, how you have dressed, all they that's completely different. Even and there's typical thing that my observation of a woman. So the veil notice, you can really find from which caste a woman is coming to the length of their veil.
Okay.
If the veil is this, lower caste, this, middle caste, then the longer the length of a veil, the higher upper caste a woman comes from.
Which area?
South Bihar.
South Bihar. So the length of the veil. It's an interesting observation. I never thought that way.
The length of a veil shows the woman comes from which caste.
Okay.
The higher caste women have the longest veils.
Longest.
Still, it's the observation of 2020 I made.
Right.
Campaign.
Right. So these practices, cultural practices, gives you symbolic capital. Now, in the context of masculine domination, Bourdieu suggests that masculinity itself becomes a form of symbolic capital, granting men greater social advantage and reinforce their domination in sphere of life. So masculinity itself gives them more resources. This symbolic capital gives them more resources to reinforce their power. So how does in family we see like men getting more resources compared to women in the family, and using that resources they exercise their masculine dominance. How it is done in our family and society, like
the parents treat differently men and women.
right. So
Even though they won't invest so much on their education.
exactly.
They
So the
feel
investment
that-
in education is one. Yeah.
They feel that what is the point of educating you, even though after studying you will go and marry.
So marriage remains the ultimate like job or a career plan in the parents' mind. Like you rightly point out, investment in education. Even the mobility is restricted. So the boys are usually pushed to in fact explore the world, spend more time outside, and girls have restrictions in terms of mobility. So it's also symbolic violence and in a way symbolic capital. Since boys have more access to it, so they are able to exercise their male dominance more. And eventually the girl, even if the girl elder sister become dependent on a younger boy, just because she has to go to market or probably tuition. So practices like that.
Education too, like coming from my family, personal experience. I can like come to Delhi and come pursue education. My cousin sisters and sister, they can't. They can't even go to PhD. Their education will be limited to a particular nearby college.
Absolutely. So
and that coming from the same resources allocated to. But
yes.
It's like you can't go.
Right. And even if you go to university, the subjects you choose. So usually it's seen that certain subjects get like women for making general statement, but for teachers, for प्राइमरी स्कूल टीचर बीएड करा दो, इस तरह के कोर्सेज करा दो बिकॉज जो घर के पास है, ठीक है ना, कि उनको शहर भेजना पड़े. And then of course the property sharing, the parents will not divide it equally between the son and the daughter. So that is central to how we acquire power. Now in the same concepts, like after covering, we have just covered 3-4 concepts: symbolic power, habitus, gendered practices, symbolic capital. Next is intersectionality, which Bourdieu primarily focuses on masculine dominance. He acknowledged that the gender intersects with other dimensions of social inequality, now such as class and race. Bourdieu recognizes that different forms of dominance can reinforce and intersect with each other, leading to more complex and nuanced power dynamics. Now, intersectionality, we have. So, what is our understanding of intersectionality? Like what he is trying to say at this stage is that not just one axis of dominance operates. So, the multiple axes of dominance operates and intersects with each other. What does this mean? The big fancy word intersectionality. Like, are we able to see it around us?
Example of capital and gender.
Capital and gender.
Capitalism and gender violence intersection, and then the example we took earlier. Can you take it an example of that?
Capitalism and gender violence.
They intersect,
Right.
and then they apply it.
gender violence, yes, you're right when you say gender violence. Capitalism is a structure operating in, but can you give specific example? मैं समझ नहीं पा रहा हूँ.
Very example we see earlier, fashion example.
अच्छा अच्छा.
So we have capitalism at work also, but we have gender notions also working at there.
Right. We have capitalism at working and gender notions are working at the same time. Right. So just to we have covered. Yeah, it's little repetition of what we have covered, but again I'll repeat. So intersectionality is an academic concept. It's not initiated by Kimberly Crenshaw's work, but it's as a legal theorist, she's the one who has make it. It became famous after operationalized this concept. So it talks about that when multiple identities intersect, it's at the intersection the operation takes place, which is difficult to. Yeah. You have to.
No,
So it's I'll give you an example. It's a common understanding is 2 + 2 = 4. But what she is saying is, when let's suppose black and women. So when there are operations for women, it will look like कि जो white women है, they will take up this space. So it becomes a white women's issue. But when there are operation for black, so it becomes black male person will take black rights movement, or that will be the cause कि black male का issue. But when black women issue comes, so it becomes invisibilized. So there's as a category, let's suppose in India, so Bhavri Devi is a case which happened in Rajasthan. So because it was said that she's a woman, she's raped. She's a woman, she is raped, but not to acknowledge that because she was a woman from the Dalit community, so she's there. That is why she was raped. She was raped by upper caste men. So it happens. उनको ना हम single category, single identity से देखते हैं. जबकि होता क्या है जब multiple identities operate कर रही होती हैं, तो multiple operation structure भी are responsible for that amount of violence. So. Okay, so these are 3-4 concepts which come across this particular text. Now let's read some part of it. I'll open it. So do we have this particular book? Page number? Masculine domination, yeah. Masculine domination, yeah. So I'll just read some share of it. It's page number 3. So, eternalizing the arbitrary, which is the preface to English edition. I'm reading from that part. So it's the second paragraph which talks about that question needs to be countered with another. So he's asking is. I'll read the question needs to be countered with another question, one that is scientifically more pertinent and in my view, politically more urgent. If it is true that the relationship between the sexes have changed less than the superficial observation would suggest, and then the knowledge of objective structures and cognitive structures of a particularly well-served androcentric society provides instrument enabling one to understand some of the best concealed aspect of what those relationships are in the economically more advanced society, then one has to ask what are the historical mechanisms responsible for relative dehistoricization and eternalization of the structures of sexual division and the corresponding principles of division. Posing the question in those terms marks an advance in the order of knowledge which can be the basis of decisive advance in order of actions. To point out that appears in history as being eternally is merely the product of labor of eternalization performed by interconnected systems such as family, churches, state and education system. This is not very simple read. It is very, so I'll just share my understanding of this particular pieces. What we are trying to understand that certain systems are first, their operations are not visible. Okay, their operations, it takes certain critical approach to institutions like church, like state, like education to first, or even in for that matter, the division of labor within the family. It's not questioned that कि घर में औरत ही खाना बनाती है, ठीक है, वही घर का काम करते हैं, किचन का काम करते हैं, मर्द बाहर का काम करता है. because it's so naturalized through our religious, through our education, that it's not questioned. And that becomes that oppression remains invisible, it remains dehistorical, and that is something which he is inviting us to look into. Now, moving on to the next part, which is prelude to the reading. I'll just read it from. So, are you able to follow the readings? Okay, so this is page number. So that the heading is prelude, and in this talk, somewhere in the middle, it talks of still more surprisingly the established order with its relationship of dominance, its rights and prerogatives, privileges and injustice, ultimately perpetuates itself so easily apart from few historical accidents that the most intolerable conditions of existence can be so often be perceived as acceptable and even natural. So he's asking again that things which look so natural that it becomes very difficult to see privileges, practice of injustice in it. And I have also seen masculine domination, and the way it is imposed and suffered as the prime example of this paradoxical submission, an effect of what I call symbolic violence, a gentle violence, which is talks about it's a gentle violence, imperceptible, which you said it's very subtle, and invisible even to the victims. So this is the important part. People who are suffering from violence will deny that they have any problem with that. They'll think this is so natural, because even to victims, external from most part through the purely symbolic channels of communication and cognition. More precisely, misrecognition. They're not able to recognize it. Recognition or even feeling. This extraordinarily ordinary social relations thus offer a privileged opportunity to grasp the logic of domination exerted in the name of symbolic principles known and recognized both by dominants and by the dominated, which is a language, a lifestyle, and more generally a distinctive property, whether emblems or stigma, the symbolically most powerful of which is perfectly arbitrary and non-predictive bodily property, skin color. So, you want to add to this, like what is this text trying to speak to?
Is there like which year was this published?
This was, I think, 60s, 70s, probably, I think. Now, what my understanding is that he is, again, connecting it with Freire's work. Last week we studied pedagogy of the oppressed, that there is an oppressor and there is oppressed. Oppressor through the practice, through the cultural practices, through institutional support, through religion, through market, through state support. So they are practicing, and the oppressed are actually supporting it because they are ignorant about it. And for them to become aware, to see the reality, totality, so it's hidden from them, their own oppression. And these practices are symbolically violent, and male masculine dominance he's talking about is the central to it. He's not saying that we can't say caste is the primary forms of oppression. He's saying no, even the caste is operating through masculine domination. So these axes are driven centrally through masculine domination. It is simultaneously, in the same page, somewhere in the middle it talks about, it is simultaneously arbitrary, contingent. So in a way he's asking us to question what is given to us natural. Any social reality, social phenomena, practices, it's not natural, it's more of like a performance, if I can use the word Judith Butler's performativity of practices, like daily gender roles are performative in nature. Now it is simultaneously arbitrary, contingent, and also sociologically necessary. It is no accident that when she wants to suspend what she magnificently calls the hypnotic power of domination. This is Virginia Woolf. She's one of the pioneer of feminist movement in the West, the first feminist wave, and the word she's using is the hypnotic power of domination. So why is it hypnotic? what is hypnotic in this domination? What becomes hypnotic in dominance?
Unconscious.
Unconscious, yeah. Something which we don't realize, or we're not able to comprehend the reason behind it. So we are just completely, drawn into it. Yeah. And let's read what Virginia Woolf, she resorts to ethnographical analogy generated genetically relating the segregation of women to the rituals of an archaic society. Now, this is a common logic, which is genetically giving women different role. I would not say inferior role, but genetically women are different from men. How is this argument? Like, genetically they are emotional. Then because they are mother, they have to become mother. So genetically they are more caregiver. They are emotional, they are rational, not less rational, irrational, overthinking, weak, yeah.
Expressive and goal oriented. Like that can talks about roles of the woman. Women
Yeah.
are considered as expressive roles.
Yeah.
Whereas men roles are considered instrumental, which are goal oriented.
Which are goal oriented, right. And in a way, they are also very fickle in the sense distracting to male progress, and the whole element that's sexually very which text Vishwamitra is a person who does that tapana, and then Menka is distraction. So the beauty which is associated to female body is a distraction. So with her charm, and she'll try to distract. So somewhere we find this biologically very reductionist argument to connect everything to the body, or even hormones for that matter. So a lot of talk about, because these are the result of the hormonal changes. So that's how genetically they are given inferior roles. Justified, at least their inferior roles are justified. And in the same page, we will see in the last part the mystic boundaries, this mystic rites, this language, the language of magical transformation and symbolic conversion produced by ritual considerations, the basis of new birth, is an invitation to orient research toward an approach capable of grasping the specifically symbolic dimensions of male domination. Now, this is again questioning the daily rituals. In the next page, page number 4, in the last paragraph, I find something interesting, which is, it is true, if it is true that the principle of perpetuation of this relationship of dominance does not truly resides in one of the most visible sites in which it is exercised, in other words, within the domestic sphere on which some feminist debate have concentrated its attention, but in the agencies such as at schools or on the state sites, which principles of domination that goes on to exercise within even the most private universe as developed and imposed, then a vast field of action is opened up for feminist struggle, which are thus called upon to take a distinctive and decisive place within political struggles of all forms of domination. Now, we do understand that feminist struggle is against all forms of domination. And in this case, what he's talking about is the dominance in the most personal sphere, in family and in relationship. And the cognitive, talks about the cognitive revolution would inevitably have consequences, the level of practices, and in particular in formulation of strategies aimed at transforming the present state of material and symbolic power relation between sexes. So now we are what he's trying to unpack is the relationship between the sexes. Relationship between the sexes, it's non-hierarchical. It's non-hierarchical. It's so naturalized. It's naturalized that its dominance is not visible. And as a feminist, our struggle enters into the personal relationship. So what could be this struggle which as a feminist family, as a feminist relationship would be going through? Like, can you think of any struggles? What are relationship struggles? I don't want to make this into a therapy session. But yeah, I could share some like relationship. One is about insecurity of my partner talking to some friend or going out probably at odd timings. I might not be comfortable that why are you having so many boyfriends or so many friends who are girl, and then there's
So that works
tension
both ways.
that works both ways. But since male domination, if I'm looking from a perspective of somebody who's trying to control and making the love as an exclusive, setting boundaries, and male doing it more often, this is whom you talk, this is whom you don't talk, and then celebrating the whole concept of love as in insecurities come with that. So I think this is some sort of tension develops on the lines of who should be our friend. Like, is it just with me or like it's a norm?
It works both ways.
It works both ways, you're saying, right?
I have an example, but it's different from this. Like in a patriarchal society where you're a single woman and somebody's bothering you, right? Bothering or trying to get acquainted,
Yeah.
like men.
Mm.
So the moment you say, like, I have a boyfriend, they will leave you alone.
Okay.
But if you just say, I'm not interested, they
Mhm.
will not leave you alone. So the emphasis is on that some other man's girlfriend is hands of a coach. But
Okay.
if you're a single woman with agency, no, that's not
Okay.
acceptable.
So it brings me to that no doesn't sound no to men. It won't-
Only if another
only-
man is
yeah,
involved, even if it's in the background,
Ah.
that is respectable.
Respectable, yeah. So that boundary is drawn by another man, like that okay. And even men fighting men, like boys fighting boys for a girl. This is my girlfriend, this is my partner, and then they get into fight. So this was one, which is more towards relationship side. Even the division of labor between the partners, between the the sexual division of labor between the partners. The most progressive, even love marriage, so to speak, there is still the child care, the care of the parents. Even the partner has to get married and move towards, the family of the son, like what is it called? Patrilocal, yeah. So patrilocal is a norm. So division of labor comes only when we see that these subtle forms of domination will not be visible. Like किसी को क्या गलत लगेगा इस चीज में कि शादी हुई है तो लड़की को हम बारात लेने जा रहे हैं, बारात लेके आ रहे हैं, लड़की हमारे घर आ रही है, इसमें क्या गलत है इसमें कुछ गलत? What do you think? इसमें क्या गलत है? बारात शादी तो होती है, लड़की लेने जाते ही, हम भी नाच के गए थे, अपनी भाभी लेके आए थे, ठीक है? सो इसमें क्या गलत है? बिकॉज इट्स सो नेचुरल, सो नॉर्मल. ऐसी तो होती है शादी, वरना कैसे होंगी? उल्टा हो सकता है क्या? लड़की वाले आए और यहाँ से लड़के की विदाई हो और फिर लड़का वहाँ जाके रहे. Let's say it becomes violence visible कब होगी? जब आप उसको रिवर्स करोगे. Because it's not a choice for a man to go and live in the house. उसको क्या घर जमाई बोलते हैं. It's big taboo. At least I don't know anyone जो ये कर पा रहा हो या फिर करने का सोच भी रहा हो. So and then think of this is like what is violence? What is symbolic violence in this? जो हम शादी करके लाते हैं इसमें, बारात लेके आते हैं, उसमें क्या symbolic violence? You think उसमें कुछ है?
Like it obviously like curtailing of women's like woman forgoes his property, whatever comfortability she has in her home.
ठीक है, property is gone, that is one.
Her comfort is gone in her home.
Comfort is also gone.
Of
ठीक है.
one's home.
She was more comfortable back home, I guess.
Supposing that.
Yeah, supposing that. But are there like more elements which we are missing, which we might be missing? What's wrong with petrilocality? Like this practice of what if she's from a different? Let's leave caste for now, keep it aside because it will be a different problem. The violence will become more visible if there is But let's say it's arranged marriage by the parents and still.
Like you were talking about the practice of living, the woman living with the man
Yeah.
and his parents,
Parents,
not
yeah.
just the
Yeah.
shadi wale din wala scene.
But it comes with that only.
That's the
Shadi wale
beginning,
din
yeah.
he.
But I think a lot of marriages mein, I
mhm.
speak abhi, okay, I'm
Mhm.
not, of course it's a huge problem. Ki
Mhm.
abhi contemporary mein, people are living in different cities and all
True, true,
those,
true.
right?
Yeah.
That
I-
procession is there, like
हाँ,
the, that moving from there,
शादी-
but it's not like the woman is then like
Staying.
it's very elitist also. He's saying this, the woman the very next day or in some time if they are not living, then they both are working. That's not the case, I guess.
That's
both times.
only when if one of them or at least both have jobs in a different, at least same city, right?
No, but, I mean, yeah, the point is living with the in-laws,
Living,
right? That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
violence
yeah.
part, I think.
Yeah, living with the
With the
in-laws.
in-laws.
Is living with the, that's what we are questioning, is living with the in-laws violence, symbolic violence?
I don't think it should be intrinsically violent, because if like out against her choice, against her option, she lives in with the in-laws. She like if she want, she had like option था कि कहीं और जाके रहेगा with husband, but say coercively हो रहा है, then it's obviously हो रहा है. But if she doesn't have an option, like she doesn't work, I'm not saying she doesn't work, then that's the most safest place to her for her to be.
Okay, so you're saying
Like
because
she will be expected to be there, and for her only ki,
expected to be there.
and for her to be there will be like after marriage, for her to be the most natural home will be her in-laws home only. It's not will be.
Why?
That's what the word naturally used beautifully. That's what we're getting. Why it's natural to go and stay with in-laws and take care of their in-laws when the son is not taking care of
His
the
in-laws.
in-laws. उसके भी तो in-laws हैं, वो भी घर छोड़ के आई है, और इसीलिए अगर वो अकेली लड़की है तो उसके लिए तो कितना मुश्किल, उसके पेरेंट्स, लेट मी जस्ट पुट दिस, अकेली लड़की है तो उसके पेरेंट्स से कौन ख्याल रखेगा? देन इसीलिए उसको लिए भाई होना जरूरी है, एंड दैट्स वेयर वी हैव द डिजायर फॉर मेल, एंड दैट्स वेयर वी हैव ये जो भ्रूण हत्या जिसको बोलते हैं, सेक्स रिलेटेड वायलेंस, कि लड़कियों को बचपन में ही मार दिया जाता है, नेग्लेक्ट किया जाता है. सो यू आर सेइंग सन प्रेफरेंस कम्स विद दिस प्रैक्टिस, क्योंकि उसकी एक लड़की रहेगी तो वो तो विदा होके चली जाएगी वहाँ पे.
When there's case of they only signal girl child, then it's the case कि male goes back to the girl's house. Male lives. That's the practice.
Where?
Yeah.
Where?
Bihar.
Female race and
I'm not aware of this, but
if like my Bua is a single child of my grandparents. Like my grandparents' father, they were second to the younger grandfather. So he has only one daughter. My Fufaji he lives in our village. Or in like wherever there is girl child, then the boy will be expected to go to that सारा property का taking care करना, everything. So he will not follow his property at his home, but he will also go and live there.
Live with the
Or permanently, not temporarily, but
Okay.
a permanent practice. If this is a single girl child, or there are 4 sisters, 2, 3 sisters, then the male will go there only.
All four will go.
not all, only one.
No, that's their choice.
One
They
will
can,
take care
it
of
is not restricted कि they can't go there,
Okay.
but it's because the property is in those them, so it is male is supposed to be go there. It's not like
Is it a taboo or it's normal?
It's normal then.
Like
Normal.
is it for the property? Ki, like if
Not
there are
for
4
the-
sisters and only one son-in-law is living, will he get the property?
No, there will be equitable distribution of the
Yeah.
property.
But he's just taking care of the parents.
Because if she left home, there is no one to take care
Care
of
of
her.
the pair
So
of
that's why
all
he's
these
practicing.
In Haryana, at least in northern this part, I am not aware of any example, not even a single example, where
and there is a quite unique phenomena developing now. Ki a girl is really searched who is single parent of the child because it's property
It's because
factor.
of the property. No?
This property factor, and it is very quite normalized if boy going there and living
But
there.
it's only with people who have property, right? So you're talking about probably middle class or upper middle class. So in that section, this might be.
That this can that can be argued. But this men going, if there is a single daughter, then that's not a taboo. Then that's expected. वो आएगा यहाँ रहेगा. वो शादी ऐसी ढूंढते हैं इसलिए.
हमारे यहाँ पे एटलीस्ट हरियाणा इस एरिया में तो बहुत बुरा मानते हैं. इट्स बिग टैबू टू गो एंड लिव एट गर्ल्स पेरेंट्स साइड. So it becomes violent when that person is coerced, like you said, coerced to live with in-laws and take care of the in-laws. It's in fact Calcutta High Court gave this judgment, na, ki if a girl, it's considered if the girl is asking husband to move away from the parents, it's a ground for, because it's so naturalized. Even the judgment said that it's so natural to expect a girl to do this. ये तो उनका धर्म है, स्त्री धर्म या फिर जो भी है बहू का धर्म. Okay, so moving ahead on this chapter 1, magnified image. So now in this we find on page number 9, in this case is page number 10. So there is an image and there's some, we'll read some part of it. So we'll start from page number 8 and then we'll move towards the image. So on page number 8, in the middle, third paragraph, this talks of, again the argument goes, the division between the sexes appears to be in the order of things, as people sometimes say to refer to what is normal. So again the question, what is normal, what is natural to the point of being inevitable, it is present both in the objectified state in things, in the whole social world, and in the embodied state, in the habitus of the agents, and the functioning as a system of schemes of perception. So it's functioning as a system, perception, thoughts and actions. Now where the purpose of communication I speak, as I do so, of categories of cognitive structures at the risk of seeming to fall in the intellectual philosophy that I have always criticized, would be to work to speak for practical schemes of disposition, the word category. So coming, he's saying, let's see, the word category sometimes seems to appropriate because it has the advantage of designating both a social unity, the category of a farmer, and the category of a cognitive structure, and of showing the link between them. It is accordance, it is concordance between the objective structure and the cognitive structure. So these are two things. There is an objective structure and the cognitive structure. So the concordance between the two, between the shape of being and the form of knowledge, between the course of the world and the expectations about it, that make possible what Husserl describes under the name of natural attitude or toxic experience. But without pointing to its social condition of possibility, this experience apprehends the social world and its arbitrary divisions, starting with the socially constructed division between the sexes as natural, self-evident, and as such contains a full recognition of legitimacy. It is because they fail to observe the action of deep-rooted mechanisms, such as those which underlie the agreement between cognitive structure and social structures, and consequently the toxic experience of social world, and the thinkers that very different philosophical stance can attribute all the symbolic effect of legitimization to factors between the order of more or less conscious and intentional representation. The strength of masculine order is seen in the fact that it dispenses with the justification, and this is the last point, an important one. So the strength of masculine order is that it is seen at the fact that it dispenses the justification. इसको कोई justification देने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. The androcentric vision imposes itself as neutral. So जो भी हम neutral की बात करते हैं वो actually androcentric view होता है, androcentric vision होता है जिसको हम neutral मानते हैं, and has no need to spell itself out in discourses aiming at legitimating it. The social order functions as an immense symbolic machine, tending to ratify the masculine dominance on which it is founded. It is a sexual division of labor, a very strict distribution of activities assigned in each sexes of its place, time and instrument. It is the structure of the space with the oppositions between the place of assembly or the market reserved for men and the house reserved for women, or within the houses between the male part and the hut, which is the female part. This, and then it goes on. So it talks of what is androcentric. So androcentric vision they have talked. The word andro means male, centric is male centric worldview. So when we say male, so there are a lot of androcentric philosophy, androcentric research, and feminist research and feminist way of looking at things is essentially the critique of androcentric knowledge production. What is androcentric knowledge production? We have, yeah, male dominance. Have you heard this? People, teachers especially talking that research needs to be objective. A judge needs to be objective. Based on the facts, we should take decisions. Science is very objective, right? So the word objective, the word neutrality itself is androcentric. How? We have read and we can reread on this sexism in science. How we think that scientists are very objective. The way we see hormones. जो हमने बताया ना कि साइंटिफिक डिस्कवरी है कि जो मेल होते हैं, जो ब्लैक मेल होते हैं, दे आर जेनेटिकली डिफरेंट एंड दे आर लेजी. ये सेक्सिज्म इन साइंस के पहले आर्टिकल्स थे इस चीज़ पे कि बिकॉज ऑफ द कलर, बिकॉज ऑफ द रीजन दे कम्स फ्रॉम, वहाँ पे बहुत हीट होती है, ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से उनकी बॉडी में कलर चेंज होता है एंड दे बिकम मोर लेजी एंड दे आर वेरी, यू नो, उनकी वाइल्ड एनर्जी होती है. एंड वाइट मैन आर सुपीरियर बिकॉज दे कम फ्रॉम डिफरेंट ज्योग्राफी एंड दिस इज साइंटिफिकली प्रूवन. सो और इस तरह से बहुत सारे, जो मैंने हार्मोन्स का भी एग्जांपल दिया था कि जो मेल के अंदर टेस्टोस्टेरोन हाई होता है एंड जो फीमेल जिनके अंदर टेस्टोस्टेरोन हाई होता है दे आर नॉट फीमेल. और बहुत सारे ऐसे एथलीट्स हैं जिनके टेस्ट हुए और फिर उनको फीमेल कैटेगरी, जब वो जीत भी गई थी कोई मेडल एंड उनके अवार्ड्स को वापस ले लिया गया था. It's because they consider this one hormone as a dividing factor, whether it's a female or a male, and then उसका percentage कितना ज़्यादा है कम है. तो just to come back to the argument, हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि androcentric जो knowledge production होती है उसमें ही neutrality की बात ज़्यादा होती है. Feminist research में especially they talk of standpoint view and trying to look at not value neutral research but value laden. So we acknowledge the position, reflexivity and taking a stand when taking a research. हमें ऐसे नहीं लगता कि ऐसे बोला था कि रिसर्चर को फील्ड को न्यूट्रल तरीके से ऑब्जर्व करना चाहिए. That's not what a feminist research will do. It will actually acknowledge the power difference, injustice in the field and then take a principled stand. ठीक है, जैसे गेल ऑम्वेट का वर्क है. She worked for but it's not like कि उनके research में you'll find कि नहीं मैं तो neutral रहूँगी, I'll not favor any caste or any cause. तो उनका cause, उनकी politics, उनका research, it all comes with a particular clarity on ethical issues. तो neutrality जो यहाँ बात की कि neutrality is always male centric neutrality. There is never a view from nowhere. Whenever somebody is watching, whenever somebody is observing, whenever something is observed, it is always observed from androcentric view. And science जो करते हैं, जो लोग experiment करते हैं, mostly scientists, सारी की सारी philosophy जो है वो सारी androcentric philosophies हैं, until and unless feminist philosophers came on field. Now just the last point and then we'll come to the end. We can't finish the whole text at this stage, but this diagram, if you're able to, let's try to think together on this diagram. Looks like a circle with different stages. तो उन्होंने टॉप पे दिया है ड्राई और नीचे दिया है वेट. इससे पहले फेमिनिस्ट ऑल्सो हैव प्रॉब्लम विद बाइनरीज कि जब भी हम किसी चीज को दो पार्ट में डिवाइड करते हैं, जैसे डे का ऑपोजिट क्या होता है? नाइट. ब्लैक का ऑपोजिट वाइट. नाउ ऐसा लगेगा कि ब्लैक का ऑपोजिट वाइट होता है, बट ऐसा है नहीं. ब्लैक भी एक कलर है, व्हाइट भी एक कलर है, ग्रीन भी एक कलर है, रेड भी एक कलर है. सो हाउ डज ब्लैक का ऑपोजिट व्हाइट? बिकॉज ब्लैक के साथ आप कुछ वैल्यूज जोड़ दोगे, व्हाइट के साथ फेयरनेस, ब्यूटी, पावर, प्रिविलेज. ठीक है. व्हाई डू फॉरेनर्स, टूरिस्ट व्हेन दे कम टू इंडिया get special, people will come and take photographs with foreigners.
Only white ones.
Only white ones, है ना? So you have to associate कि जो binaries जब भी बनती है ना, they are not equal, they are hierarchical. So men, women, तो black का opposite white नहीं होता है, ठीक है? इसी तरह से अब let's see division जो होता है, जैसे dry और wet यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, and then they have given meaning to it that नीचे जो दिया है wet वाले part में feminine, cultivated, nature. So feminine, women is connected more to nature, sacred of the left hand, dominated, cold north, night winter, feminine. इसको opposite जो दिया है, जैसे यहाँ नीचे wild nature है तो ऊपर दिया है masculine, which is official, religious, public, hot, south, day, noon, masculine, dominant, and the sacred is the right hand. What is sacred is right hand, sacred of right hand could be. Even वैसे बहुत सुना है कि जब हाथ दिखाने आते हैं.
He is associating right with dominant and left with dominated.
Yes. True.
It's a very limited view.
Yes.
No, same like white and black.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
Right hand.
Yeah. And the phrase also that this person is the right hand.
Mm.
So it means that person is more powerful than the other one. Yeah.
Right hand man.
Yeah. So to the point I'm just to conclude is, if you look at binaries, always look at binary looks so naturalized. हमारी किताबों में from grammar school से हम opposites पढ़ना सीखते हैं, तो लड़के का men का opposite women, ठीक है? So all the binaries are not neutral, all the binaries are hierarchical. And can you think of more examples on binaries and where we see hierarchy?
Whenever someone new is entering into your home, then people will automatically tell you, no, come by putting your right leg first.
So that's what the right is considered. Or the right hand or right considered more strong. Yeah. So nothing is natural, it is just given meaning by us. Okay, I mean, because it's not even easy read and cannot be finished in one class. So we'll pause just to bring back the whole concepts which we have discussed today. So we started with the symbolic violence. We started with the whole concept of masculine domination and how it is invisibilized, naturalized with language, with culture, with our practices, even daily practices, cultural norms, and how then gradually men acquire more power. And then we also discussed certain practices like this location during marriage, patrilocality is the word, I keep forgetting, that's why I use vague term. And intersectionality we discussed symbolic capital, that how symbolically certain sections acquire more power through certain practices and language. Now this is not just like we have done with the reading, but it's an important entry point to read further. This is no substitute for reading the original text. Please. Yeah.
So again, the talk about power, right?
Yeah.
So Bourdieu, we all know, is a very popular philosopher, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, for me, personal opinion, I've not read the whole thing, but just the sections we read. I mean, this work is particularly, I think, 1998. This published,
Okay.
right? So all the things that he's talking about has already been taught by, as we know, feminist authors, right?
Right,
In the 70s, you mentioned Crenshaw, Butler, early 90s, Bell Hooks, and Foster Sterling. So, and I'm looking and he's not cited any of the feminists.
Okay.
Foucault also, I mean.
Yes, I did Foucault.
No, I mean, I don't know him. So, I think, I mean, that's also a function of power somewhere, right?
Right.
Because, and this is very common, I feel, with like disciplines in general, where feminists have been doing work on certain concepts for long, and then these ideas get, of course, you can't classify something as 100% original, but should be acknowledged.
But
that
due reference should be given, and that's also a way of sharing power,
yes,
sharing space,
exactly.
and acknowledging it.
That work has been done in this like the
Field.
same not even just the field, the same areas, the same descriptions, the same binaries being pointed out, the hierarchies, the naturalization of sex, the biological sex, and you also like use the word, right, butler performativity. That book was like written in early 90s.
90s, yeah.
So,
I was thinking like Lee Strauss writing on hierarchies, social hierarchies, how sexist division also gives you hierarchies. Like being a unmarried male in a family, it gives you less power compared to married male. So there are certain positions, and you acquire power through certain roles, and that even I have not he has not cited like thinkers, especially the feminist thinkers, what you're saying is. And have you checked like in the whole text it's not there, just the initial part?
No, just the
First part, yeah.
First part.
Yeah.
And he's cited some French philosophers because I think he's writing in French.
French, yeah.
Like he wrote it in French, it's a translation,
yeah.
and but the
Even
ideas
then,
were prevalent already.
Right. So it's not like it's new, it's coming from. Yeah. That's an interesting take. When we are reading him, we should be very skeptical about like, is he giving due credit to feminist scholars who have already worked on similar concepts? With this brief note, I would like to end now. This is also an invitation for people, if you are reading some of your similar texts or feminist texts in your own coursework or out of hobby, just please feel free to reach out and use this platform. जिसमें आप भी आके कोई भी reading share कर सकते हैं. So we'll be more than happy to provide you space and support. Okay. So this, thank you so much. Is it okay to have one picture? Yeah. Computer center.
Question for you.
Ortho?
There's a question.
Just a quick